All right. Who did it? Who did it? This question is of vital national and world importance. After the most serious piece of provocatia you can imagine. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Early yesterday morning, Moscow time, or in the early evening before last, Washington time, Vladimir Putin came under the most personal attack yet, or so someone intended. Apparently, Putin was not at ground zero, or as a Russian would call it, the epicenter. This was not a nuclear attack, but it was an attack on the Kremlin. The first time anyone has gotten that close to damaging Moscow's centuries-old administrative fortress. This raises an immediate question. Who did it? The Russians accuse the Ukrainians, who in their view, and probably objectively, have the most obvious motive. But, laying aside any chance of a false flag pseudo-operation, others have motives too. Before I dive into the details of yesterday's incident and tell you who I think did it, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, Pravda, better than CNN. Now, that's actually a general principle. It's a subtle dig on American legacy media. But in this case, it takes on some far more strenuous significance. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. And now, first, the details of the attempt against Putin. The Kremlin has residential quarters for the Russian head of state, just as any other palace has residential quarters. This is probably the largest combined head of state palace and administrative headquarters in the world. But that's Russia for you. They build them big, and I mean big. 2 drones successfully blew up over the Kremlin in the pre-dawn hours. But Putin was not president, according to RIA Novosti, quoting his spokesman Dmitry Peskov. 2 unmanned aerial vehicles, evidently loaded with explosives, overflew the Kremlin early yesterday morning, Moscow time. The Telegram channel Intel Slava Z had the best detail of any of the messages coming out of Russia. I quote, 16 minutes passed between the strikes of 2 UAVs on the Kremlin, TVC reports. The first drone was spotted over the Kremlin at 2:27 a.m. Moscow time. It exploded over the Senate Palace, after which a fire broke out on its roof. The impact of the second drone was recorded at 2:43 a.m. Its fragments fell on the territory of the Kremlin. Close quote. The times in that report correspond to 7:27 p.m. and 7:43 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings, or Washington time. Russia keeps Moscow Standard Time, which is 3 hours ahead of Coordinated Universal Time, which usually is Greenwich Mean Time. Exactly 12 hours after the attack, the Intel Republic channel carried this message, quote, Kiev regime terrorists fail in attempt to strike Kremlin presidential residence with 2 kamikaze drones on night of May 3rd. Swift action taken by armed forces and radar warfare systems put drones out of action with no casualties or material damage to Kremlin. Putin was unhurt in attack, with Moscow stating it was assassination attempt on Putin, and vowing to take any and all retaliatory measures it sees fit. Update, Putin was not in Kremlin at moment of attempted terror attack, according to Kremlin spokesman Peskov. Close quote. Kiev regime is Russia's word for the current government of Ukraine. 25 minutes later came another report with an embedded animation. It claims to show a dome of the Kremlin on fire from the explosion of the drone. That would correspond to the fire on the roof of the Senate part shortly after the drone blew up. 7 minutes later came yet another message with more footage claiming to capture the moment of the explosion. At 4:08 p.m. Moscow time, Russia was claiming further attacks against the Seshka airfield in the Bryansk region. Russia has now declared Ukraine, or the Kiev regime as they call it, a terrorist state. I'm going to get into its official statement, but first, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, the employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Two messages on Intel Slava Z carried messages from two Duma members making this point about Ukraine being a terrorist state. And in addition, the Russia Foreign Ministry issued this statement at 3:08 p.m. Moscow time on their own channel. Here is a verbatim translation. Quote, "Tonight, the Kiev regime attempted to strike the Kremlin residence of the President of the Russian Federation with unmanned aerial vehicles. 2 unmanned aerial vehicles were aimed at the Kremlin as a result of timely actions taken by the military and special services with the use of radar warfare systems. The devices were disabled. As a result of their fall and the scattering of fragments on the territory of the Kremlin, there are no victims nor material damage. We regard these actions as a planned terrorist action and an attempt on the president carried out on the eve of Victory Day, the parade on May 9th, at which the presence of foreign guests is also planned. As a result of this terrorist act, the president was not injured. The schedule of its work has not changed. It continues as usual. The Russian side reserves the right to take retaliatory measures where and when it sees fit." Close quote. I have a link in the description to a tweet carrying the best embeddable footage I could find. For what this is worth, Agence France Presse reported that Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, denied any involvement. Early yesterday evening, Dr. Steve Turley reported that Zelensky was in Finland at the time. I have a link in the description to his video, which he issued early yesterday evening, more than 20 hours after the attack. The banners reading 9 Maya are part of preparations in Russia to celebrate Victory Day. This is the anniversary of the final defeat of Germany during World War II. We call it VE Day, for Victory in Europe, and we celebrated on May 8th because midnight had not yet fallen on our side as it had in Moscow. An influencer calling itself the Aussie Cossack flatly accused the Ukrainians and suggested Russia would now wage unlimited war against Ukraine. I have a link in the description to his video, and I will quote you an excerpt of his remarks. "Surely this is the last straw. Surely this is where there are no more chances, no more warnings, no more threats, no more polite warnings as Russia usually gives Ukraine. Enough is enough. This is an attack on every single Russian, not only in Russia, but everywhere. To see the Kremlin burning, this is the epitome of attacks, unquote, Aussie Cossack. The Daily Beast can't seem to decide whether to believe Russia this time or not. In fact, this has happened before. The Daily Beast carried a report last week about an alleged attack on Putin with an exploding drone. Back then, they said Putin was covering it up. But yesterday, they were expressing doubts about this latest incident. Now, which is it, Daily Beast? If any of its editors is listening to me now, I invite them to leave a comment. So what happened in the wee hours of a Moscow morning? I see three possibilities. First, the Russians laid on a false flag pseudo operation. The outlet Defiant America suggests precisely that. The main difficulty with that theory is the remarkable aplomb with which the Russians are taking this. Threatening retaliation? Oh, most certainly. But they are not simulating casualties, and some of their reports claim no damage to the Kremlin. In fact, every report coming out of Russia specifically denies any casualties from this incident. Second, Ukraine did it, as the Russians are now accusing. But why do it when the head of state, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is out of the country? 0 hour is a strange time for the supreme commander to be absent. Besides, Vladimir Zelensky has a nasty reputation, but not one for suicidal zeal. He would know that he would only be inviting such an attack upon himself personally. But one other person has a motive and would not care who else would get hurt. That person is Klaus Schwab, head of the World Economic Forum. He regards Putin as his mortal enemy, precisely because Putin sees himself not only as a new Tsar of all the Russias, but also, and most provocative for a man like Schwab, as defender of the faith. Free Republic discloses another reason. Putin has long planned with his allies in Brazil, India, China, and South Africa to displace the globalist banking system. On the other hand, remember why Russia attacked Ukraine to begin with, in addition to coming to the aid of Donbass residents when they asked him to. Putin knew about biological weapons development facilities in Ukraine, and he had to destroy them. Now, if that were all there was to it, the conflict could be over by now, yet the war continues. Is it due entirely to American insistence and misplaced American idealism? Or, as some now charge, the Bidens acting like a crime family and carrying out a scheme for graft? The Bidens might not be so smart, so we turn to Schwab, who, as I have said before, looks and acts like a classic James Bond villain. Now, all he needs is a white cat sitting on his lap, letting him stroke, 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 while he calmly issues orders for a further escalation, perhaps as a deliberate act of provocation, or as a Russian would call it, provokatsiya. Links in the description of the article, to the tweets showing footage of the first attack, to videos by Steve Turley and the Aussie Cossack, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlives.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to this channel and links to my Ukraine playlist and to Dr. Steve's and Aussie Cossack's videos. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.